No one inside Washington expected this to be said out loud, and certainly not in such a direct, unfiltered way. These are the kinds of questions that usually stay buried behind closed doors, softened by technical language, or avoided altogether to protect careers. But that is not what happened here. Eric Swalwell did not ease into it, did not disguise his intent with polite phrasing, and did not hide behind procedure. He looked Kash Patel straight in the eye and spoke the one name that everyone connected to those files had carefully avoided for years: Donald Trump. And then he tied that name directly to Jeffrey Epstein and demanded answers. If you watch nothing else, pay attention to Patel's face in that moment, because once you see it, the entire exchange suddenly makes sense. And if you're new here, subscribe and turn on notifications, because this story does not end tonight, and every new development is going to matter. To understand why this moment landed the way it did, you need to picture the setting. This hearing was originally scheduled as a closed-door session of the Senate Intelligence Committee, the kind where sensitive topics are discussed away from cameras. But at the last minute, Swalwell pushed to make it public. He argued that what was about to be discussed belonged in front of the American people. That decision alone raised eyebrows, though at the time most observers didn't yet understand why. It becomes very clear once the questioning begins. Kash Patel entered the room the same way he always does. Calm, confident. 3 attorneys walking closely beside him, with aides following just behind. His posture was familiar. Shoulders squared, chin slightly raised, the body language of someone who believes he has already survived worse scrutiny than this. He has testified before Congress many times. He knows how to redirect questions, how to slow things down, how to give answers that sound complete without revealing anything meaningful. He knows how to last. What he did not anticipate was what was coming next. The opening stretch of the hearing felt routine. For nearly 40 minutes, senators asked predictable questions about intelligence budgets, counterterrorism priorities, and surveillance procedures. Patel handled it smoothly, offering measured responses and carefully worded explanations. He checked his watch more than once. At times, he looked almost bored. Nothing in those early exchanges suggested what was about to happen, which is exactly why the shift felt so sudden. Then Eric Swalwell took the microphone. He didn't raise his voice. He didn't rush. He simply said, "Director Patel, I want to talk about the Epstein files." Patel's expression barely changed. This was not a new topic. He had heard variations of this question before, and he clearly had prepared answers ready to go. "Of course, Senator," he began, "as I've stated in previous testimony." But Swalwell cut him off immediately. He wasn't interested in rehearsed lines. He opened a thick folder filled with color-coded tabs and said plainly that he wanted to talk about what Patel had not told Congress. That was the moment the room changed. You could feel it instantly, the kind of shift that happens when everyone realizes something unexpected is unfolding. Swalwell didn't pause. He went straight to the point. He asked why every document in the Epstein files that referenced Donald Trump had been reclassified after Patel became FBI director. The room didn't just grow quiet, it froze. This wasn't normal silence. It was the kind that happens when dozens of people stop breathing at once. Patel's reaction unfolded in stages. First, a brief flash of surprise, then irritation, then control. His face settled into that familiar, neutral expression politicians wear when they know cameras are watching closely. He said he had no knowledge of any reclassification targeting documents related to any specific individual. No knowledge at all. Swalwell didn't hesitate. He pulled out a document and began reading from it. It was an internal FBI memorandum dated March 15th of this year, issued 3 months after Patel assumed his role. The memo instructed the Classification Review Board to fast-track a review of all Epstein-related materials that referenced current government officials or individuals connected to them. Swalwell raised the paper so cameras could clearly see it. It carried the signature of Patel's deputy director. Then he asked the question directly. Was Patel seriously telling the committee he knew nothing about it? Patel glanced toward his attorneys. They gave him nothing. No notes, no whispered advice. This wasn't something they could shield him from. He responded by saying, "Classification reviews happen regularly," trying to make it sound procedural, routine, harmless. Swalwell immediately pushed back. "There was nothing routine about this," he said. "Since Patel took office, 23 documents that had already been approved for public release were pulled back and reclassified. 23. And every single one mentioned Donald Trump. Swalwell leaned forward and made it clear. This wasn't random. This wasn't coincidence. This was a pattern. And in that moment, the hearing crossed a line it could never uncross. Patel immediately tried to pivot, attempting to turn the discussion into a political debate, painting Swalwell as a partisan attacker rather than addressing the documents in front of him. "Senator, I find it disappointing that members of this committee continue to pursue politically motivated," he began. Swalwell didn't let him finish. The senator's voice was calm but sharp, cutting through the pretense. "Politically motivated? Director Patel, I am not the one who reclassified documents to protect the former president. You are. I am not the one who swore an oath to uphold the law and then buried evidence. You did." His tone rose, not in uncontrolled anger, but in measured intensity, the kind that makes the room sit up and take notice. You could feel the frustration hardening into a demand for accountability. "Do you understand what's in those documents? Do you understand what the public would learn if they were released?" Patel's jaw tightened. "Senator, I'm not going to speculate on classified material." Swalwell leaned forward, undeterred, and produced another paper. It was an unclassified summary of witness testimony from 2019, a woman employed at Epstein's Palm Beach residence. She had given 14 names of men she personally saw with underage girls at the property. Swalwell didn't break eye contact with Patel, as he stated plainly that one of those names was Donald Trump. The room didn't erupt in noise, but the reaction was immediate. Audible gasps, reporters scrambling for their phones, senators exchanging glances that mixed disbelief with relief. Something that had long been whispered and suspected was now being spoken openly, recorded on the Congressional record. Patel tried to interject, insisting the testimony had been reviewed. Swalwell didn't pause. "And then what?" he countered. "The documents were stamped, classified, locked away, erased from view, and for 6 years no one outside the FBI had seen them." He rose from his chair mid-hearing, a rare sight, the energy in the room shifting visibly. "The FBI has had that testimony for 6 years. Instead of investigating, instead of following leads, you reclassified it. You didn't protect national security. You protected Donald Trump. And everyone in this room knows it. The moment that followed is going to be replayed endlessly." Swalwell held up a large color photograph for everyone to see, including the cameras. It was Trump and Epstein together at Mar-a-Lago in 1997, both grinning, familiar, comfortable. "This image has been public for years," he said. "What the public hasn't seen are the 37 additional photographs taken at that same event, all logged as evidence in FBI storage. Your office has refused to release them. So tell me, Director Patel, what's in those pictures? What are you keeping hidden?" Sweat began to form on Patel's forehead, visible even under the harsh lights of the hearing room. He tried to deflect, citing privacy and investigative concerns. Swalwell slammed his palm on the desk, making the microphone jolt. "Epstein is dead. Maxwell is serving time. That chapter is closed. The only explanation for keeping those photos classified is someone powerful doesn't want them released. And we both know exactly who that is." A deafening silence followed. 20 full seconds stretched out in the room, an eternity in a congressional hearing. Patel remained frozen, his attorneys silent, his prepared talking points useless against the evidence laid bare. Finally, he spoke, his tone subdued but defensive. He rejected the notion that the FBI had shielded anyone, insisting that all classification decisions were strictly based on national security and law enforcement concerns. Swalwell shook his head slowly, weighing each word. He painted the picture plainly. An FBI director appointed by Donald Trump, whose career is tied to Trump, systematically concealing evidence, linking the former president to a convicted sex trafficker for nearly a year. "That isn't law enforcement," he said. "That is obstruction." He promised the American people that the committee would uncover the truth, even if it meant personally subpoenaing every document in the building. Technically, the hearing continued after that moment. Other senators asked questions about cybersecurity, foreign interference, procedural issues, but the room's attention had already shifted. The only thing anyone was really focused on was the record Swalwell had just put on camera. Donald Trump's name appearing in Epstein files, and Kash Patel actively keeping it hidden. Within minutes, the footage went viral, circulating across Twitter, TikTok, YouTube, and cable news. Legal analysts immediately debated whether Patel's testimony could constitute obstruction of justice. Inside the FBI, staffers were likely scrambling to anticipate questions that had never been intended for public scrutiny. To understand why this moment is so significant, you have to step back and consider the context. For years, there has been endless speculation about what's in the Epstein files, who else might be implicated, and which powerful figures were protected. Reddit investigations, conspiracy theories, late-night conversations, and endless commentary have tried to fill the gaps, but speculation is not evidence. What Swalwell did was lay out actual evidence on the record: real documents, internal memos, witness testimony, all pointing to names that had been shielded. And the name that appeared consistently, the one every reclassified document seemed to orbit around, was Donald Trump. This is not an accusation of guilt, not in the legal sense. Swalwell was not charging anyone. He was reporting what existed in the official files, what had been hidden, and what the American people had a right to see. And it became clear that the patterns Patel had overseen were not coincidental. 23 documents had been reclassified after Patel became FBI director, and each one referenced the former president. That fact alone sent a shockwave through the room and into every news outlet that would later cover it. Swalwell did not stop at exposing the documents. He laid out the consequences and the next steps in a way that left no ambiguity. He announced that the committee would subpoena all 23 reclassified documents. He demanded a closed-door briefing with the Classification Review Board. He called for an Inspector General investigation into Patel's handling of the Epstein-related evidence. Whether any of that will actually proceed remains uncertain. Washington has an extraordinary talent for letting controversies fade, for moving on to the next headline. But in that moment, none of it could be ignored. The footage of Patel sitting under the lights, sweating, with no defense left, became a symbol. It was the physical manifestation of accountability in action, and it spread across social media and cable networks with astonishing speed. The impact of what was revealed cannot be overstated. For 6 years, critical witness testimony remained unseen, buried in FBI storage, classified, locked away from the public. Swalwell made it clear that these were not procedural oversights. This was an intentional pattern of suppression. Each time Patel had the opportunity to release the material, to investigate leads, to follow through with the responsibility entrusted to him, it was buried instead. The images, the photographs, the memos, all remained inaccessible, hidden behind the veneer of bureaucratic procedure. But Swalwell peeled back that veneer in plain sight, showing not just one piece of evidence, but a series of actions that pointed to a deliberate effort to keep certain information away from public scrutiny. Even the photographs alone were explosive. The public had seen one widely circulated image of Trump with Epstein at Mar-a-Lago in 1997, but there were 37 additional photographs from the same event that had been logged as evidence in FBI storage. Patel's office had refused to release them. Swalwell held up the evidence, pointing directly to Patel and asking the question plainly, "What are you keeping hidden?" It was no longer speculation. It was documented. It was on the Congressional record. And the response or lack thereof was telling. Patel had no immediate answer. There was no quick pivot, no diversion, no explanation that could withstand scrutiny. The room understood the gravity of what had just been revealed. That silence alone spoke volumes. Swalwell's approach, methodical and relentless, forced Patel into a corner. Every prepared talking point, every rehearsed defense, failed in real time. This wasn't about politics or partisan attacks. This was about evidence, about holding someone accountable for the decisions they made while in a position of enormous responsibility. And in that space, the audience, both inside the hearing room and across the country watching it unfold, witnessed something rare. A senator not just asking questions, but connecting dots and demanding clarity in a way that had never been done before. Every action, every hesitation, every glance from Patel told a story of its own. But the overarching narrative was unmistakable. The files were being protected, and the name at the center of that protection was Donald Trump. What makes this moment even more remarkable is how Swalwell handled the confrontation. He didn't yell, he didn't overdramatize, he let the facts speak for themselves, but he framed them in a way that left no room for evasion. As Patel continued to insist that every decision was made for national security reasons, Swalwell calmly dismantled that argument piece by piece. He reminded the committee and the public that these were not theoretical concerns. They were specific, documented actions. 23 reclassified documents, witness testimony naming 14 individuals, dozens of photographs, all pointing to a deliberate choice to hide information. Every step of Patel's defense fell apart under the weight of evidence, and it was visible in real time. Even the attorneys at his side were powerless. The prepared scripts, the whispered advice, the pre-planned talking points, they offered no protection. The pattern was there, undeniable, and everyone in the room could see it. Swalwell did something that few politicians are willing to do. He named names on the record. He directly connected Trump to Epstein's network without embellishment, without accusation of guilt, simply stating the facts as documented in official records. He asked hard questions, demanded explanations, and held Patel accountable in a way that left viewers and reporters stunned. The energy in the room shifted every time a new document or piece of testimony was presented. You could feel the tension building, like a dam on the verge of breaking. The moment when Swalwell held up the photograph from Mar-a-Lago in 1997 was almost cinematic. Everyone knew the image. Everyone had seen it before. But the context combined with the 37 other photographs and the evidence of intentional reclassification transformed a familiar picture into something explosive. "What are you keeping hidden?" Swalwell asked, and Patel had no answer. The viral impact of this hearing cannot be overstated. Within minutes, clips were being shared on social media, dissected by legal analysts, political commentators, and journalists across every platform. The public, long curious about what was in the Epstein files and who might be protected, suddenly had something concrete to react to. For 6 years, people had speculated. Now they had a record. And it wasn't just about Trump or Patel. This moment highlighted the accountability or lack thereof inside institutions entrusted with powerful authority. It underscored how decisions made in secret can shape public trust, and how one determined senator could force transparency, at least temporarily, into the light. The story doesn't end with this hearing. Swalwell didn't just expose the actions. He laid the groundwork for follow-up. Subpoenas for all 23 reclassified documents, closed-door briefings with the Classification Review Board, Inspector General investigations, all were formally requested. Whether these actions will move forward, whether any enforcement will occur, remains uncertain. Washington has a way of letting attention fade and controversies slip into memory. But this moment, the public confrontation, the documentation, the explicit connection made on the record cannot simply be erased. It is now part of the historical record, a clear instance of one senator challenging the system and forcing visibility into actions that were intentionally hidden. And the image of Patel, visibly sweating under the lights, with no recourse, no explanation, is going to be remembered as the physical manifestation of that accountability. Swalwell's performance is noteworthy not just for the evidence revealed, but for the method and courage behind it. Many politicians avoid confrontation, rely on procedural defenses, or seek to obscure the truth through technicalities. Swalwell did none of that. He approached this methodically, presenting documentation, following logical progression, and maintaining composure. The result was undeniable. Patel was cornered, exposed, and unable to dismiss the core facts. The hearing room became a stage for transparency, the cameras capturing a moment that will remain part of public discourse. And for viewers, the takeaway was unmistakable. For the first time, someone in power directly asked what everyone else had feared to say, and the answer, or the lack thereof, was clear for all to see. The climax of this hearing wasn't just about documents or testimony, it was about accountability in real time. Swalwell rose from his chair, papers stacked deliberately, and pointed directly at Patel. He spoke what everyone had quietly suspected for years, but no one with authority had dared to say aloud. "You protected Donald Trump, and everyone in this room knows it." Those words weren't political spin, they were an accusation rooted in evidence. And in that moment, the power dynamic shifted. Patel, for all his experience, for all his rehearsed answers, had no escape. The cameras captured it, the public saw it, and the record was set. For hours after the official questions continued, nobody was really listening to the standard topics: cybersecurity updates, procedural clarifications, foreign interference reports. All that faded into the background because the weight of what had just been revealed dominated the room. Donald Trump's name in the Epstein files, documents reclassified under Patel's watch, witness testimony suppressed for 6 years, these were not theories anymore. This was now a matter of record, undeniable and public. Within minutes, the footage went viral, spreading across every social media platform and news network. Analysts debated potential obstruction, legal implications, and the unprecedented nature of the disclosure. Inside the FBI, it's almost certain staffers scrambled to answer questions that were never meant to be asked publicly. For years, the Epstein files had been a source of speculation, rumor, and debate. Now, for the first time, verified evidence had been presented on camera. The documents, the memos, the photographs, and the testimony all laid bare a systematic pattern that pointed to one consistent fact. The reclassified materials repeatedly referenced Trump. Swalwell's role was not to judge guilt. It was to report what existed, what had been hidden, and to demand answers. And Patel, once confident and untouchable, was left with no room to maneuver. The story doesn't end here. Subpoenas for the 23 documents, classified briefings, and Inspector General investigations have been formally requested. Whether they succeed is uncertain, but the historical record has changed. The evidence is public, the questions have been asked, and the pressure has been applied. This hearing also highlights a broader truth about accountability, power, and transparency. It shows how one determined individual, armed with evidence and resolve, can cut through layers of bureaucracy and secrecy. The videos, the documents, the reactions, all now part of the record, illustrate the tension between authority and oversight. Swalwell's persistence forced a confrontation that, until now, had been avoided by design. And the images, the documents, the testimonies, they are tangible proof that even the most protected figures can face scrutiny when the system is challenged correctly. This is a story of patience, courage, and procedure intersecting in the public eye, and it underscores the importance of holding institutions and individuals accountable, regardless of their influence or status. For anyone watching, the takeaway is clear. This is not speculation. This is documented fact. One senator stood up, presented evidence, and forced transparency into a space that had long been sealed. Patel, under the glare of the hearing room lights, had no answers that could reconcile the documented pattern. The truth is coming out, piece by piece, document by document, hearing by hearing. And while Washington may attempt to bury controversies or shift public attention, this moment is permanent. It has been recorded, shared, and analyzed. The sledgehammer that Swalwell brought to the walls protecting these files is not going back in the shed. The pressure builds, and cracks will widen until answers are forced into the light. For viewers, for citizens, and for history, this is a rare glimpse of accountability in action, and it matters. It will matter in ways that extend far beyond a single hearing room or a single day of news coverage.